The observation deck of the Gentar reconnaissance vessel Eternal Harmony was a study in calculated perfection. Crystalline walls shifted with holographic displays, each surface a delicate membrane between technological marvel and pure aesthetic beauty. Captain Rylax stood motionless, his scaled skin reflecting the soft azure light of the primary monitoring array, a living statue of evolutionary precision. For 1,000 years, the Galactic Confederation had maintained absolute equilibrium. 7 advanced civilizations had long ago transcended the primitive conflicts of their evolutionary past. War was a distant memory, conflict a theoretical concept studied in historical archives rather than experienced firsthand. Peace was not just a state of being, it was the fundamental axiom of galactic existence. Junior communication analyst Zira couldn't stop her third set of respiratory membranes from quivering. Her tentacles, normally perfectly controlled, betrayed a nervous energy that would have been considered almost barbaric by Confederation standards. Something was wrong. Catastrophically, monumentally wrong. "Repeat the scan," Rylax commanded, his voice a low resonance that vibrated through the ship's neural interface. Zira's manipulation of the holographic controls was a dance of precision. Quantum algorithms sifted through cosmic background radiation, parsing minute variations that would have been invisible to less advanced sensor arrays. The signal persisted, chaotic, raw, impossible. "Confirmed, Captain," she reported, her voice remarkably steady despite the implications. "The transmission originates from the quarantine system designated as Sol, planetary body, Earth." Captain Rylax moved with a grace that belied his massive frame. Each step was calculated, a product of millennia of evolutionary refinement. The Gentar were not merely a species, they were a living algorithm of survival, their entire civilization a machine of perfect adaptation. The holographic display expanded, revealing layers of historical data. Earth, a name that had become little more than a footnote in galactic archives. A primitive civilization that had been quarantined nearly 12,000 years earlier after a series of catastrophic global conflicts. The last reports suggested total planetary extinction or regression to pre-technological barbarism. Yet here was a signal, a scream into the cosmic void. "Analyze the transmission characteristics," Rylax ordered, his membrane-covered eyes narrowing to microscopic slits. Zira's tentacles danced across the interface. The signal was unlike anything in the Confederation's extensive databases. It wasn't a coherent communication. It was a cacophony, fragments of music, mathematical equations, linguistic patterns, technological noise. Each fragment seemed to contradict the last, a symphony of organized chaos. "It doesn't make sense," Zira muttered, a breach of protocol that would have resulted in immediate disciplinary action under normal circumstances. The ship's central eye, an entity more complex than entire planetary governments, began to compile its analysis. Quantum processors that could calculate galactic trade fluctuations to 15 decimal points now struggled to make sense of the transmission. Captain Rylax felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, something dangerous. Something that predated the 1,000-year peace. Fear. "Prepare communication protocols," he commanded, "and ready the diplomatic vessel. Whatever is happening on Earth, it requires immediate investigation." Zira's response was automatic, but her respiratory membranes continued to flutter. "Standard first contact procedures, Captain." Rylax's response was something new. Something that would be recorded in Confederation archives as the moment everything changed. "No," he said, his voice a blade of cold certainty. "Nothing about this is standard." The Eternal Harmony hung in the cosmic darkness, a beacon of technological supremacy suddenly feeling very small. The signal from Earth continued, a relentless, incomprehensible transmission that seemed to mock the very concept of peaceful civilization. Something was awakening, something the Galactic Confederation had forgotten, something that had been waiting, patient and deadly, for 1,000 years. Earth had been silent for millennia. And now, It was screaming. The archives buried deep beneath the United Earth Historical Preservation Complex were a labyrinth of forgotten memories. Dr. Elena Rodriguez moved through the climate-controlled corridors with the precision of an archaeologist who had spent decades uncovering humanity's most closely guarded secrets. Her fingers, calloused from years of handling delicate historical artifacts, traced the edge of a titanium-reinforced vault that hadn't been opened in generations. Most of humanity believed their history began after the global Reconstruction era, a sanitized narrative of peaceful technological advancement. Elena knew better. The truth was far more complex, far more dangerous. Her current project was something whispered about only in the most classified circles, a comprehensive psychological profile of human potential, not just a historical record, but a living document that could serve as humanity's ultimate defense mechanism. Each file she examined was a puzzle piece of human resilience, innovation, and an inexplicable capacity to transform adversity into opportunity. The vault's biometric lock recognized her unique genetic signature. With a soft hiss, layers of quantum-encrypted security systems disengage. Inside, thousands of data crystals documented humanity's most brutal and most innovative periods, a history that had been deliberately obscured from public knowledge. Elena's neural implant began processing the data, her augmented brain filtering through petabytes of information in milliseconds. She found what she was looking for: a series of historical records that painted a radically different picture of human development. Wars that should have ended humanity instead drove technological leaps. Economic collapses that should have destroyed societies instead sparked unprecedented innovation. Natural disasters that should have crushed human spirit instead resulted in remarkable adaptations. Each catastrophe was not an endpoint, but a crucible of human potential. A notification flashed across her retinal display. The first alien probes had entered the solar system. "Right on schedule," she muttered. Most of her colleagues in the United Earth Diplomatic Corps believed in standard first contact protocols. Peaceful engagement, measured responses. Elena knew better. The contingency protocol she had been developing for years was about to be activated, a comprehensive data burst that would serve as humanity's true introduction to the galactic stage. In her private lab, a quantum communication array hummed to life. It wasn't a weapon in any traditional sense. It was something far more dangerous, a complete psychological profile of human potential, compressed into a data transmission that would challenge everything the alien civilization understood about intelligent life. Elena's fingers danced across holographic interfaces. She selected specific historical moments, not just humanity's achievements, but its failures. The data would show a species that didn't just survive, but one that transformed through conflict. The Siege of New Delhi, where urban populations turned architectural limitations into defensive innovations. The Amazon Restoration Project, where ecological collapse was transformed into a global regeneration effort. The Mars colonial conflicts, which demonstrated humanity's ability to adapt to the most hostile environments imaginable. Each moment was a testament to human unpredictability. Her neural implant detected the first active scanning attempts by the alien probes. Most humans would be unaware, their daily lives continuing uninterrupted. But Elena understood the significance of this moment. First contact was never about initial communication. It was about first impression. And humanity was about to make one hell of an impression. The communication array reached critical charge. Elena input the final authorization code, a sequence so complex it incorporated not just mathematical algorithms, but cultural nuances, psychological profiles, and strategic information. Outside her window, the first alien probe passed the orbit of Mars. Inside the preservation complex, thousands of years of human history compressed into a single, incomprehensible transmission. Elena Rodriguez allowed herself a small smile. The aliens thought they were coming to investigate a quarantine planet. They had no idea they were walking into a psychological minefield. Humanity had been waiting, preparing, watching. And now, they would be noticed. The transmission burst from the communication array, a scream of human potential that would echo across the galaxy. First contact had begun. Ambassador Kvax of the Galactic Confederation studied the holographic representations of previous first contact missions with clinical detachment. 37 successful diplomatic encounters across 3 galactic quadrants, each a testament to the Confederation's unparalleled ability to manage interspecies interactions. The diplomatic vessel Celestial Harmony was more than a ship. It was a living testament to negotiation, peace, and calculated precision. Kvax's species, the Vornax, were renowned as the ultimate diplomats. Evolutionarily designed with multiple neural networks that could process emotional and rational inputs simultaneously, they could read the psychological nuances of virtually any sentient species. Their bodies were living instruments of communication, skin that could shift color and texture to convey complex emotional states, neural tendrils that could detect microscopic changes in biochemical stress responses. This mission to Earth was supposed to be routine, a simple confirmation of the planet's status, either complete extinction or primitive development. The Confederation's record suggested a civilization that had destroyed itself through nuclear conflict, environmental collapse, or internecine warfare. The preliminary data streams from the initial probes were confusing. Analyze. Kvax commanded the ship's central intelligence. Holographic displays erupted with seemingly contradictory information. Technological infrastructure that suggested advanced capabilities. Cultural transmissions that defied logical categorization. Communication networks that were simultaneously primitive and startlingly complex. Commander Lyra, Kvax's second-in-command, approached with measured steps. Her own neural tendrils were coiled tightly, a sign of significant stress for a Vornax. The preliminary psychological profiles are impossible, she reported, her voice a carefully modulated frequency designed to convey professional concern. Our predictive algorithms cannot generate a consistent model of human behavior. Kvax's skin rippled with a pattern of deep purple and metallic silver, a diplomatic expression of profound uncertainty. In 30 standard galactic cycles of diplomatic service, they had never encountered a species that resisted standard classification. The ship's communication array suddenly erupted with a transmission that defied all standard protocols. It wasn't a single message, but a cacophony of inputs. A mathematical equation describing quantum entanglement. 3 seconds of what appeared to be a musical performance. A legal document about environmental protection. A comedy routine about bureaucratic inefficiency. A technical schematic for a waste recycling system. Translate. Kvax commanded, though they knew translation was impossible. This wasn't communication. This was a deliberate, provocative assault on diplomatic norms. The ship's AI, after several microseconds of processing, returned a response that would have been considered impossible in any previous first contact scenario. Unable to generate consistent meaning. Transmission appears to be simultaneously serious and satirical, technical and emotional, structured and chaotic. Commander Lyra's neural tendrils began to pulse with an unprecedented frequency. "They're testing us," she whispered, a realization that sent tremors through the ship's psychological dampening systems. Kvax understood immediately. This was no ordinary first contact. This was a psychological probe, a deliberate attempt to destabilize standard diplomatic engagement. Humanity was playing a game whose rules had not yet been written. The diplomatic protocols stored in the vessel's memory banks, millennia of refined interspecies negotiation, suddenly felt inadequate, useless. The humans had introduced a variable that the Confederation had not encountered in 1,000 years. Unpredictability. "Prepare secondary contact protocols," Kvax announced, their skin now a complex tapestry of colors that would have taken xenopsychologists decades to fully interpret. "But do not approach with standard diplomatic packages." Commander Lyra's response was instantaneous. "What approach do you recommend?" Kvax's answer would be recorded as the moment the Galactic Confederation's 1,000-year peace began to fracture. "We listen," they said, and we prepare to be completely, utterly surprised. Outside the ship, Earth continued its relentless, incomprehensible transmission. A planet that was supposed to be a footnote in galactic history was about to become its most significant chapter. First contact had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. Major Jack Chen stood in the United Earth Defense Force's primary strategy center, a neural interface allowing him to process information at speeds that would have been impossible just a decade earlier. The holographic displays around him flickered with incoming data from the alien reconnaissance vessels, each transmission analyzed, dissected, and understood in milliseconds. This was not the military of humanity's past. This was a force evolved through centuries of conflict, technological innovation, and relentless adaptation. Incoming transmission analysis, announced Dr. Aisha Kapoor, the center's lead sinological strategist. Her fingers danced across multiple holographic interfaces, each movement a complex algorithm of potential responses. The alien diplomatic vessel is attempting standard first contact protocols. They have no idea what they're walking into. Jack's lips curled into a slight smile. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for generations, not through traditional military buildup, but through something far more sophisticated. The strategy was multilayered, complex, and fundamentally human. The first line of defense wasn't a weapon. It was information, cultural complexity, psychological unpredictability. Initiate Protocol Chimera, Jack commanded. Across multiple communication networks, a carefully orchestrated response began to unfold. It wasn't an attack. It was a demonstration, a deliberate display of human potential that would challenge every assumption the alien civilization had ever made. In low Earth orbit, satellite networks began transmitting a series of seemingly unrelated data streams. Mathematical proofs sat alongside musical compositions. Technical schematics were interwoven with philosophical treatises. Each transmission was a puzzle, a provocation, a challenge. Dr. Kapoor's analysis showed the alien systems struggling to process the information. "They're trying to categorize us," she muttered, "but we refuse to be categorized." Jack understood the true nature of their strategy. Humanity had spent generations learning how to turn weakness into strength. Every historical challenge, environmental collapse, technological disruption, global conflicts, had been a training ground for this moment. The military component was just one layer of their response. In research facilities around the globe, teams were already working on rapid technological adaptations. The alien probe scanning technologies were being analyzed, understood, and countered within hours of first detection. Quantum communication networks were being modified to create communication channels that would be incomprehensible to the alien systems. "They expect a linear response," Jack said, more to himself than to anyone else. "We're going to give them anything but." A series of transmissions began to pulse from Earth. Each was a carefully constructed piece of human complexity. A live stream from a street festival in Lagos, showing cultural diversity and spontaneous organization. A mathematical proof that simultaneously solved and created new quantum mechanics problems. An architectural design for a city that could adapt to multiple environmental conditions. A musical composition generated by an AI, but with intentional imperfections that suggested human creativity. Legal documentation outlining potential diplomatic engagement, written in a language that was simultaneously precise and poetic. Dr. Kapoor's systems detected the alien vessel's increasing confusion. "They're trying to apply their standard diplomatic algorithms," she reported. "But our responses are rendering those algorithms useless." This was humanity's true weapon, not technology, not military might, but the ability to be fundamentally, gloriously unpredictable. Jack watched the holographic displays, each one a window into a carefully orchestrated response. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. It was presenting itself as a species that refused to be understood through standard frameworks. "They want to see us as a problem to be solved," Jack said quietly. "We're going to show them we're a puzzle that can't be solved." The alien diplomatic vessel hung in orbit, its sophisticated systems struggling to process the tsunami of information coming from Earth. Each transmission was a challenge, a provocation, a declaration. We are human. We are not what you expect. And we are going to change everything. The first phase of first contact was complete. The real conversation was about to begin. Dr. R.F. Patel's laboratory was a cathedral of human potential. Nestled in the heart of the global research complex, it was a place where the boundaries between psychology, technology, and pure imagination blurred into something entirely new. Massive quantum processors hummed alongside organic neural network samples, while holographic displays danced with data that defied conventional understanding. The Confederation research teams had been analyzing human data for precisely 72 hours. They believed they were conducting a scientific investigation. RF knew they were walking into a carefully constructed psychological trap. "Activate Rosetta Protocol," he murmured to his primary AI assistant. The complex systems around him came to life, beginning a meticulously designed sequence of information dissemination. This wasn't just research. This was a comprehensive psychological provocation designed to systematically dismantle the aliens' understanding of intelligent life. The first layer was deceptively simple. Historical records, carefully curated to showcase humanity's most paradoxical moments. Periods of absolute destruction immediately followed by unprecedented creativity. Economic collapses that sparked technological revolutions. Environmental catastrophes that led to radical innovations in sustainability. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's earlier work provided the foundation. RF was about to turn it into a weapon. Each data packet was a puzzle, a challenge, an invitation to understand something fundamentally incomprehensible. The Confederation's research vessels were equipped with the most advanced analytical systems in the known galaxy. Quantum processors that could calculate complex multidimensional problems in microseconds. Neural networks that could parse millions of cultural variations. They were completely unprepared for human complexity. Arev's team had spent years developing what they called cognitive dissonance algorithms. These were not traditional research methodologies. They were psychological provocations designed to challenge fundamental assumptions about intelligence, adaptation, and potential. A transmission began to pulse from the research complex. It wasn't a single message, but a symphony of contradictions. Detailed mathematical models showing human economic systems that appeared chaotic but contained deep, almost organic levels of self-regulation. Artistic expressions that simultaneously celebrated and critiqued human existence. Technological schematics that showed radical approaches to problem-solving. Solutions that emerged from constraint rather than abundance. Psychological profiles that demonstrated how human trauma could be transformed into creative potential. The Confederation's research teams began to experience something unprecedented. Their analytical systems were struggling, not because the information was incomprehensible, but because it refused to be confined to any single mode of understanding. Humanity was presenting itself as a living contradiction. Dr. Priya Sharma, RF's lead xenopsychological analyst, monitored the alien research responses. "They're trying to categorize us," she reported, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and strategic calculation. "But we're designing our responses to make categorization impossible." This was the true nature of human potential, the ability to be simultaneously rational and emotional, destructive and creative, predictable and utterly unpredictable. Arav watched the holographic displays, each one a window into a carefully constructed psychological warfare strategy. The aliens were looking for patterns. Humanity was going to give them a kaleidoscope. "They want to understand us," Arav said quietly to his team. "We're going to make understanding impossible." Deep in the research complex, quantum processors began generating a new series of transmissions. Each was a deliberate provocation. Linguistic algorithms that could generate languages that changed based on emotional context. Technological designs that incorporated biological principles in ways that defied traditional engineering. cultural analyses that showed how human societies could simultaneously hold completely contradictory beliefs and still function. The Confederation's research teams were experiencing something close to psychological vertigo. Their most sophisticated analytical systems were being challenged at a fundamental level. Humanity wasn't just resisting classification. It was demonstrating that classification itself was a limited concept. As the transmissions continued, one thing became abundantly clear. The aliens had discovered something far more dangerous than a technological threat. They had discovered a species that refused to be understood, and they had no idea what was coming next. The Confederation's Central Intelligence Hub was a marvel of architectural and technological precision. Situated on the crystalline world of Nexus Prime, it was the nerve center of galactic governance, a place where 7 advanced civilizations had maintained their delicate balance of power for a millennium. Holographic displays stretched across kilometer-wide chambers, each surface a living network of information, prediction, and control. Director Zornak of the Confederation's Strategic Analysis Division watched the incoming data streams with growing alarm. The human transmissions were no longer just a curiosity. They were becoming a systemic threat. "Analyze," he commanded, his voice a precisely modulated frequency that could activate the hub's most advanced quantum processing systems. The initial reports were impossible. Humans were not just adapting to the Confederation's technological probes, they were actively repurposing them. Alien communication technologies were being reverse-engineered within hours of first contact. Scanning systems designed to gather intelligence were being transformed into something entirely new. A young analyst named Kira approached, her neural tendrils coiled with a mixture of professional concern and scientific excitement. "Director," she reported, "the humans are doing something unprecedented. They're not just responding to our technologies. They're learning from them in real time." The holographic displays began to show a terrifying progression. Quantum communication systems that had taken the Confederation centuries to develop were being comprehended, modified, and reimagined by human researchers in days. Technological barriers that were considered fundamental limitations were being casually dismantled. This was more than technological adaptation. This was a fundamental challenge to the Confederation's understanding of technological development. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's earlier psychological profile was proving to be devastatingly accurate. Humanity wasn't just a species. It was a living, breathing system of continuous adaptation. Zornek's skin, a complex biological interface that could process emotional and rational inputs simultaneously, began to shift in patterns that would take synapsologists decades to fully interpret. Fear, excitement, confusion, respect. "Show me everything," he commanded. The displays exploded with information. Humans were developing quantum communication methods that shouldn't be possible. They were creating biological adaptation technologies that defied the Confederation's most advanced research. Every technological probe, every scanning system, every attempt to understand was being transformed into something new. Transmission intercepted from a human research facility sent tremors through the entire intelligence hub. Technology is not a destination. It's a conversation. Kira's analysis was brutal in its simplicity. "They're not just learning," she said. "They're reimagining the entire concept of technological development." The Confederation had spent a millennium believing that technological progress was a linear, predictable process. Humans were demonstrating that it was an organic, unpredictable dance of innovation. Zornek watched as human researchers took alien scanning technologies and transformed them into something entirely new. A communication probe became a medical diagnostic tool. A military scanning system was repurposed into an environmental restoration technology. Each modification was a deliberate provocation, a demonstration that technological purpose was fluid, not fixed. The truly terrifying revelation was not the speed of human adaptation. It was the apparent lack of traditional technological constraints. Most advanced civilizations developed technologies within carefully controlled parameters. Humans seem to view technological limitations as interesting challenges to be overcome, not immutable laws. "They're not just reverse engineering," Zornak muttered. "They're rewriting the fundamental rules of technological development." The intercepted human transmissions became increasingly complex. Mathematical proofs that simultaneously solved and created new scientific problems. Technological designs that incorporated biological principles in ways that defied traditional engineering. Communication systems that could adapt their fundamental structure based on emotional context. Kira's final report was a masterpiece of understatement. The humans are not developing technology. They are engaging in a continuous conversation with possibility itself. As the Confederation's intelligence hub processed this information, one thing became abundantly clear. Humanity was not just a species to be studied. They were a force of continuous, unpredictable transformation. And nothing would ever be the same again. The United Earth Strategic Command Center was unlike any military installation in human history. Nestled deep within the Andes Mountains, it was a living ecosystem of strategy, technology, and human potential. Commander Elena Volkov stood at the central interface, her neural implants processing information at speeds that would have been impossible a generation earlier. Humanity's approach to the Galactic Confederation was not a military confrontation. It was a systematic deconstruction of everything the aliens understood about conflict, diplomacy, and survival. "Initiate Phase Omega," Elena commanded. Around her, a team of strategists, psychologists, economists, and technological innovators began a coordinated assault that would redefine the concept of warfare. The Confederation had maintained peace through a delicate balance of technological superiority, diplomatic protocols, and carefully managed economic interdependence. Humanity was about to show them how fragile that balance truly was. The first wave was economic. Human financial algorithms, developed through centuries of economic volatility, began to infiltrate the Confederation's trade networks. These were not traditional hacking attempts. They were living, adaptive systems that could modify themselves in real time. Dr. Aisha Kapoor, the lead economic strategist, watched the holographic displays with a predator's intensity. "We're not attacking their systems," she explained to her team. "We're demonstrating the fundamental instability of their economic model." Entire trade routes began to shift, not through direct intervention, but through a complex dance of information, prediction, and strategic manipulation. The Confederation's economic systems, which had remained unchanged for centuries, began to show hairline fractures. Simultaneously, a different team was working on a more subtle form of engagement: cultural infiltration. Maya Rodriguez, a xenocultural specialist, had developed a series of communication protocols that were equal parts art, psychology, and strategic provocation. Human media streams began to flood Confederation communication networks, not as propaganda, but as a deliberate challenge to their understanding of cultural exchange. Music that defied traditional harmonic structures, art that was simultaneously a mathematical proof and an emotional expression, literature that could change its narrative based on the reader's psychological state. The Confederation's diplomatic and cultural firewalls, sophisticated systems that had managed interstellar relations for a millennium, began to show signs of fundamental weakness. "They've forgotten how to be challenged," Elena muttered, watching the displays. The military component was the most subtle of all. Human strategic thinking had evolved through centuries of asymmetric conflicts. They weren't preparing for a traditional war. They were demonstrating that the very concept of war was obsolete. Quantum communication networks were being systematically modified, not to attack, but to create communication channels that the Confederation couldn't comprehend. Each transmission was a puzzle, a provocation, a strategic bluff. "We're not fighting them," Jack Chen, the military strategic coordinator, explained. "We're forcing them to reimagine the entire concept of conflict." The breaking point came not through violence, but through a complete psychological and systemic challenge. Human teams began to introduce variables into the Confederation's most fundamental systems. economic models that incorporated emotional intelligence, diplomatic protocols that could adapt in real time, technological development strategies that viewed limitations as opportunities. Director Zornak and the Confederation's leadership watched in growing horror as their carefully maintained systems began to show signs of fundamental instability. This wasn't an attack. This was a systematic demonstration of the limitations of their 1,000-year-old approach to civilization. Elena Volkov's final transmission to the Confederation was a masterpiece of strategic communication. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the continuous ability to transform. The holographic displays in the Strategic Command Center told a story of systematic, multilayered engagement. Economic systems were being reimagined. Cultural exchanges were becoming a form of strategic communication. Technological development was being transformed into a living, adaptive process. Humanity wasn't just challenging the Galactic Confederation. They were offering a new way of existing. And nothing would ever be the same again. The Galactic Confederation's Grand Assembly Hall had stood unchanged for 1,000 years, a testament to stability, order, and carefully managed progress. Now, it was about to witness its most significant transformation. Representative Kithak stood at the central podium, their body a complex tapestry of colors that spoke of profound psychological turbulence. Around them, representatives from 7 advanced civilizations watched with a mixture of fear, confusion, and a growing sense of something unprecedented. Humanity, Kithaks began, their voice modulated to carry the weight of 1,000 years of diplomatic tradition, has challenged everything we understand about intelligent life. The holographic displays told a story of complete systemic disruption. Economic models that had remained stable for centuries now fluctuated with unprecedented complexity. Cultural exchange protocols were being rewritten in real time. Technological development had transformed from a linear process to a living, adaptive system. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was not physically present, but her influence permeated every aspect of the assembly. The psychological profile she had developed was now the primary lens through which the Confederation viewed humanity. "We are not facing a threat," Kthaks continued, their skin shifting to a color that represented a complex mixture of respect and existential challenge. "We are facing an invitation to reimagine our entire approach to civilization." The assembled representatives understood the true nature of the challenge. Humanity had not conquered the Confederation through traditional means. They had systematically demonstrated the fundamental limitations of the existing galactic order. A transmission began to play, a message prepared by a diverse team of human strategists, researchers, and cultural experts. It was not a declaration of war. It was an offer of transformation. Maya Rodriguez, the xenocultural specialist, appeared in the holographic projection. Her presence was deliberately diverse, a visual representation of human complexity. "We are not asking to join your confederation," she said, her voice carrying layers of meaning. "We are asking you to consider that the most advanced form of civilization is not stability. It's continuous adaptation." The transmission continued, a carefully crafted demonstration of human potential. Mathematical models that showed how chaos could be a form of progress. Cultural expressions that simultaneously critiqued and celebrated existence. Technological designs that viewed limitations as opportunities for innovation. Psychological frameworks that embraced contradiction as a form of strength. Dr. Arif Patel's research team had prepared the most provocative component, a comprehensive analysis of how human societies had transformed their most significant challenges into sources of innovation. Economic collapses that sparked technological revolutions, environmental catastrophes that led to sustainable design, conflicts that became catalysts for cultural understanding. Jack Chen, representing the strategic perspective, offered a final provocation. "Peace is not the absence of conflict," the transmission stated. "It is the continuous ability to transform." The Confederation's representatives experienced something unprecedented. Their most sophisticated analytical systems were struggling to process the implications. Humanity was offering more than an alternative approach to civilization. They were demonstrating that the very concept of a fixed civilization was fundamentally limited. Thex's final report to the Assembly was a masterpiece of diplomatic understatement. Humanity is not a species to be understood. They are an ongoing conversation with possibility itself. As the transmission concluded, the representatives of 7 advanced civilizations understood the true nature of the challenge. This was not a confrontation. This was an invitation to reimagine everything they thought they knew about intelligent life. The 1,000 years of carefully managed peace had ended. A new era of continuous transformation was beginning. And humanity had just changed everything. Epilogue. In the vast cosmic dance, humanity was not a footnote. They were the unexpected melody that would reshape the entire composition.